Hi everyone, I'm going to be doing my presentation on autism spectrum disorder. I really wanted to do it on Asperger's syndrome or disorder, but then I realised that that is no longer a label, so I've had to change it. The change was made in 2013 by the DSM, which stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And now there are 3 levels of autism. So I'll be talking about that as well as what was Asperger's syndrome. Then I'll be talking about the diagnosis of ASD, treatment, therapies, and interventions, and then looking at music therapy interventions as well as approaches and studies. Part of my reason for choosing this diagnosis was I read this book in beginning of 2000, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. It's written from the perspective of somebody who might have autism or Asperger's, and it was just a really insightful look and to see how he perceived the world. And I'm just really interested in working with people that have this diagnosis in the future. So the Autism Society describes Asperger's as this, but the main distinguishing diagnosis is that people with level 1 autism have no speech delay, and they fall into having above normal intelligence. It was discovered by Hans Asperger in 1940s, but obviously it no longer exists as a label. These are famous people who have Asperger's disorder or level 1 autism. And I think it's just really interesting to know that they have it, because I think people like Anthony Hopkins is an amazing actor, and I just think that having this disorder is probably contributed to his success as an actor. Just being able to see the lines on the page, the script, in a different way than anybody else. So here is the diagnosis of ASD. As you can see, there are 3 levels. So somebody with Asperger's would fall into level 1, which is someone who requires support, but not as much as someone who falls into levels 2 or 3. And within each level, there are defining factors depending on their social interaction, their verbal skills, their social interest, and then if they're able to be flexible to do with their routine. So when the label was taken away from Asperger's disorder just to autism spectrum disorder, the effect, it sort of had an effect on parents and teachers, because they didn't want their child who has Asperger's to be grouped or lumped together with somebody on the autism spectrum disorder, which is just an umbrella. They thought that there would be a stigma attached to having their child just known as someone with autism, rather than the distinguishing features of Asperger's syndrome. So a study was looked into the effect and impact this would have on parents or teachers. But the study actually found that most people in the US actually have a high degree of autism knowledge, and therefore no stigmas or labels would be attached to somebody within the level 1 of the spectrum. There was no detrimental effect to the change. So let's look at some of the characteristics of somebody with level 1 ASD. One of the characteristics is monotropism, and this means being extremely attention tunneled. So think of somebody with blinkers on, and they can only focus on one task, and it's really intense when they do it. They can only see things in black and white, and when they have a reaction to something, it's all or nothing. And these types of extreme reaction can really isolate them from their peers because their peers just don't understand. They also really don't cope well with fear of failure. It can be all-consuming to them. So treatment for ASD autism. There are two types of treatment that I found. Drugs, two types of drug. These are the TJ54, which is a Japanese herbal medicine, and bumetanide, which is a diuretic pill. And the pill is normally used to reduce extra fluid in the body and can lessen symptoms such as shortness of breath, swelling in the arms, legs, and abdomen. But the studies that I found to do with this, unfortunately, they only focused on single case studies. So this was qualitative research, and because of the limited case studies, there's not enough evidence to say that these two drugs actually work for people with ASD. Looking now at alternative therapies, as you can see, there are an extensive list of other therapies to use other than music therapy, but I'll be focusing on mind-body therapies and behavioural therapies because I found studies related to them. Mind-body therapies. Horston and Ashley did a review of autism and mind-body therapies in 2017. They said a description of a definition had to include an intentional or mindfulness component, as there are many varying definitions. Examples of mind-body therapies are meditation, yoga, Tai Chi, and mindful-based cognitive therapies. In behavioural therapies, recent research has suggested that social initiation and socio-emotional understanding is the major barrier in socialisation for those with high-functioning ASD. And that's a quote from Blankenship and Minshawi. They did a study and they created this emotions thermometer for people with ASD because they knew that people with ASD wanted to make friends and start conversations, but they didn't know how. They also struggled with describing and recognizing their levels of emotion, especially anger. People with ASD tend to have difficulty controlling their anger because they can't describe how they're feeling. It's either really angry or not really angry. So they found that visual aids and cues are easier for these types of individuals to process. And having the emotions thermometer could help them change the way that they're feeling, or at least recognize it. Other interventions, just interventions. A study was done on social communication intervention by Samtha. They found that speech-language pathologists tried to bridge the gap between the client's knowledge of social communication and actually using it. So as we just said, people with ASD want to have meaningful conversations with others, but just don't know how. And this study also found that visual reminders are helpful in pointing out opportunities to ask questions or make comments for people with ASD. The study also found that adults with ASD have problems with organisation and planning. Now I'm going to look at music therapy approaches and goal areas. As you can see, there are many different approaches which all can be applied to music therapy, but I'm going to be looking particularly at the early Denver START model because I found a study on it related to music therapy. It was done by Hernandez Rui, that's how you say it, in 2018. And the purpose of the study was to investigate the feasibility of a music therapy program which coaches parents in the behavioral strategies that enhance their children's social interactions. So they wanted to see if this model would be, could be affiliated with music therapy, and that music therapy could help the parents with strategies of ways to helping their children cope with ASD. And the children were preschoolers. So the model is based on a framework, and the framework has 4 components to it. So I'm going to describe the components and then say how music therapy can back up those components, and they can work together. So the first factor is coordinated routines, and the way music therapy can help that is by introducing the hello and goodbye songs as a form of routine. The second factor is harmonious continuation. And in music therapy, this could be modeled by the music therapist who is modeling the musical interactions with the families. The third factor is mutual cooperation. This is parents helping out in the music activity. And then number 4 is emotional ambience, and this is expressed in the parents and the child's enjoyment of the music activity. So the last thing I want to to show you are goals for children with ASD in music therapy. So 4 types of goals. The first is sensory, and this could involve improving sensory processing, increasing body awareness, improving postural stability, and increasing engagement and sustained interaction. In motor goals, they could work on improving their gross or fine motor skills and improving their motor coordination skills. In cognitive goals, they could improve on attention and their working memory, improve cognitive flexibility, and improve academic skills. And in communication, they could improve their receptive language and their expressive language. So in conclusion, the different levels of ASD require different approaches of music therapy treatment. You should look at the individual who has common goals with other people with ASD, but treat them uniquely and as themselves. I hope you enjoyed my presentation.